Thanks for that, Gun. Well, it's good to be back in New Zealand. It's also a great pleasure for me to welcome and introduce Professor Tom Furness. He was my PhD supervisor and then when I came to New Zealand, a mentor, and he's also involved with the lab here as our international director, so he's certainly very influential in my life. But Tom also has a long history in the virtual reality domain, stretching back into the 1960s. So some of the innovations you start seeing entering the commercial sector over the last 20 years in VR originated from the work he did, first of all in the US Air Force, and then at the University of Washington. And in fact, if you trace back some of the key technologies and people involved with the HoloLens, with Magic Leap, with companies like Daiquiri in Los Angeles doing AR, and many of them have their roots back into the lab at the University of Washington. So I'll turn the time over to Tom, and he's going to give us a really interesting talk about putting places into people. Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Mark and Rob and all my old friends and new friends that are here. Just happy that my trip here was able to coincide with this meeting, and what an exciting project you have. And I'm just happy to be a part of it, and hopefully I can contribute. Now, my talk is about places. And when we talk about virtual reality, we talk a lot about places. And what I want to dwell on is how do we actually put places into people, because that's really the way we work. That's the way our brain works. And I'm going to take a very top level view of this. I'll get into some nits and grits along the way, but I want you to think about this, that really is what we're trying to do, is to put places into people. Now, talking about places, one of my favorite places here in New Zealand is a root-burn track. That was certainly something that changed my life forever. It's one of those experiences that'll never go away. But it happened because I was there. I was physically there. I could walk in the snow. Actually, the track was in the snow. It just opened again after a snowstorm in the middle of February. And but it was wonderful. Everything, what I was able to see, what I was able to hear, what I was able to breathe, all of it. A memorable thing. And all of you have same experiences, different, perhaps a different place, but places where you can go in your mind again and be there. And you're in a place now, in this building, the Erskine building. It's interesting that, let's say that we were having this meeting at night, and something happened, maybe an earthquake or something, all the lights went out, everything was black, completely black. That you could make your way out of this building. And the reason you could do that is because when you came into the building, you built a model. You built a mental model of the spatial characteristics of this building. Now, if I had blindfolded you and led you into this building and then showed you a video of the building and how it all works and a diagram and all this kind of thing, and then the lights go out and you have to make your way out of the building, you couldn't do it. Because you built this place in your head in the process of moving into this place. So there are other places that we go. For example, this came up a few years ago when I was talking to a person about reading. Now, reading, we create places too, don't we? From our imagination. And these are really great places. As a matter of fact, I had this wonderful place built in my head after I read Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. And then Peter Jackson went off and ruined it because it wasn't the same place I had created in my head. But I could visit that place. And whenever I read a sequel, I go back to that place I created in the first book. And those people, their faces and things like that. When you talk to a person on the phone, you don't know who they are, but in your mind you create a place. You see them somewhere. You see where they're sitting, what they look like, all of that. We do that. We as humans do that. It's interesting about back to books. Let's say that you're reading a novel, and there's this great passage in this novel that you remember after you finished, and you go tell your wife or friend, you say, wow, you got to read this. And then you have the book, and where is it? How do you find it in the book again? You want to show it to your friend. How would you do that? What do you remember? You sort of remember something about the passage, but Mark? Well, if you mark the page, certainly you go to that. But what if you didn't mark the page? How would you remember it?
It's hard to get there. But remember how far through the book it was.
Exactly. You sort of remember it was about this far in the book, and it was up here on the right-hand side of the page. So what you had was actually spatial coordinates. Even though you're reading a book, something that is very symbolic, abstract, you had spatial coordinates to help you locate your direction back to that passage. A few years ago, actually my first PhD student at the University of Washington, Chris Byrne, we were just getting started in VR and from the academic side. For years before, I've been doing it in the military side. But one of the things we wanted to do was determine, can we use virtual reality for teaching complex topics? And so we've done some things with kids in terms of they're building their own virtual worlds and things like this. And this was really in the early 90s we were doing this. And we knew that they had fun doing it, and they could build these marvelous virtual worlds. But we didn't know if it had an impact in terms of teaching. So what we did is a study with a local high school, one of the high schools, and the chemistry course. And we picked out a modular chemistry course that, working with the teachers, about electron orbitals. And this was a very abstract topic, very difficult for students to capture what's really going on with these electron orbitals, orbital shells, as you add more atomic, greater atomic numbers and things like that. So what we decided to do is build 3 treatments for a group of students. And these students were the bright students as well as students that were making almost failing grades. And the 3 treatments were, first was the traditional method, where the teacher uses the textbook, the whiteboard, and lectures. The second treatment was a computer-aided instruction technique, where you had a tutorial, you can interact with the computer and things like that to do this study, this particular module. And then the third was a virtual reality one, where you put on a headset. This is old clunky equipment at that time, but you put on this headset, a data glove, and you go into a atom building room. So you're shrunk down to the size of an atom, and then what you do is you physically construct an atom. You have these bins. There's a bin for protons, neutrons, and electrons. And what you do is take out of the bin, proton, neutron, you put it together to form a nucleus. Mind you, this is a sort of simplistic model of atoms. But you put them together into the nucleus, and then you take an electron out of the bin, and you give it a spin and an energy level. You have this slider, energy level, and then you put it in this orbit, and this starts going around in this orbit. And then you add more atomic numbers, more protons and neutrons and so forth, and you build this up to the different shells. So one of the things that we did was, after this, we tested all these students to find out how well they comprehended this subject. And so at the end of the module, we found out that for the smart students, the ones that are making A's, when they're getting top grades, but didn't make any difference. They got the same grades. The ones that took the treatment of the lecture versus the art didn't make any difference. But the kids that were making failing grades, the ones that are making C's and D's, they caught up with the smart kids at the end of the module. And then when we tested them a year later, they were better. Now, what this told us is there's nothing wrong with those kids at all. It was just the way that they learned. But what they remembered when we asked them, I remember the place. I remember going into the atom building room and how all of that worked in terms of the energy levels, the atomic numbers, and the orbits, and that kind of thing. So this gave us another hint that, wow, what power we have when we have places, when we're able to put these places into people. So that's really my premise, that in order to take advantage of these places, we have to figure out a way to put the places into people. And if we're going to do that, we have to put people in places. So this brings up some questions. Okay, what is really the importance of doing this? putting these people into places? Well, it's clear that there are two things that are factors here. One is certainly the fact that we can use our whole body to learn. And that's probably part of it. These students were really the ones that were the poor students, were spatial learners. They had to have their hands on, they had to be in it, into this constructivistic approach to pedagogy. So they were able to use their natural abilities. They didn't have to do things that were really way abstract. And then the second part, of course, is the memory, what they were able to retain. It's clear that with those places you can retain that. So the questions come up, well, can we do the same thing with virtual places? Would they be the same as going into these real places? Would we remember them the same? Could it be a substitute? Because in some cases, like in the atom building world, you can't really put a person into that physical place. It's impossible. We could shrink people in size. For example, what it would be like walking at the speed of light. We can do those kinds of things in VR that we couldn't do otherwise. So a few years ago, this came up, this whole topic of places came up again. I was invited by Kodak, Eastman Kodak. That's when there was actually a company, Eastman Kodak. Eastman Kodak pretty much invented, Eastman actually invented photography on a large scale. And they actually invented digital photography, Kodak did. But they were making such obscene profits on film that they decided to sell off the digital photography stuff. Then, of course, that took over. But Kodak invited me to give a talk at their award ceremony. They have an annual award ceremony for all of their scientists and engineers in Rochester, New York. And this is a big deal. I mean, there are 3,000 scientists and engineers in this auditorium there. And they invited me to talk about the future of imaging. And I thought, well, I'm going to have some fun with this. And so my whole idea was I'm going to convince Kodak that they were not in the image business, that they're really in the transportation business. And that changes the whole model of the way they should do their business. And so I stand up in front of all these engineers and I tell them, okay guys, I'm here to tell you, to convince you that you're in the transportation business. And so, this black Saracen played, who was this guy, from Seattle, he must be on something, And so I said, here's why you're in the transportation business. Let's say that that we want to go visit the Grand Canyon. And that basically we show up on here at the Grand Canyon. And we get out of our car, and we go and stand on the lip of the Grand Canyon, and we whip out our camera, and we take a snapshot. This is while we still have film. You take a snapshot of this Grand Canyon, right? Picture of the Grand Canyon. And you take the film back home, turn it in the drugstore, and that develops and prints your photograph. And you're looking at your photograph, and you're saying, it's not like that. You show it to your friends, you say, well, but you sort of need to be there, to understand it. And so I said, that's the problem. You're in the transportation business because you move our eyes to another place in another time. You build a vehicle for that. The problem is this vehicle has really small windows. And what you need to do is build a vehicle that lets you open the door, walk outside, and be there. And then to be there again, and again, and again. And have your friends come in and be there with you. And this is how you do it. So I outlined this whole program for them. Starting out with a world capture system, a world synthesis system, a world delivery system, how you would network it, all the pieces that would go together, this whole program, detailed diagrams, everything. It's only for fun, to do this. Anyhow, when I finished, this executive vice president was sitting in the front row, came up to me and he said, have you ever written that down? About this world vision system? I said, no, I just did it for fun. He said, would you mind putting together a concept paper on this world vision system. And I said, okay, sure, I'll do that. And I sort of wrote it down and all the diagrams and everything. And they started a program. It was a $20 million program to begin with. It was, they awarded to the University of Washington Head Lab the largest project they've ever awarded to anyone outside of Eastern Kodak. And the problem is it was too late because the footsteps were coming. I told them the only way you're going to do this is for Kodak to team up with Sony, and then you guys can rule the world with this thing. And this was now in 1997, something like that I was giving this talk. So the problem is, how do we go back again to a place? Or how do we go to a synthesized place? So Mark mentioned a little bit about my trail that I've had, and it's been a great experience for me, not particularly because of anything I did, but because I just happened to be there at the time. And I got a chance to do some cool things. Starting off with, in the early days, in the 60s, my contemporaries were Mort Heilig, who was working on the Sensorama, and Ivan Sutherland, who was working out how do you do interaction in displays. And here I was, an Air Force officer, a young Air Force officer, and I was trying to figure out how to interface humans to complex machines. And so some of the developments were underway about this time. They were really sort of crude. I mean, pretty much what Mort Heilig was trying to do is just some kind of 4D type theater. Not interactive, but it was really the first 4D theater because you had smells, you had shakes, you had wind blowing in your face, you had 3D sound and 3D vision in his Sensorama. And of course, what Ivan was able to do is actually go into these worlds that were computer generated, but they were really sort of crude and used mechanical coupling and things like that. Meanwhile, this is what I was trying to do. I was trying to figure out how to take one crew member and hook them to a very complex machine. So this one guy interacting with a very complex system. And you're really riding in this system and going really fast and pulling lots of G's and things like that. So my job was to figure out how in the world you get bandwidth to and from the brain of the pilot. When you look at traditional cockpits like the F-15A and the F-15E, this is an evolution of cockpits going from steam gauges to a lot of electronics. Really, they're so complex. A typical cockpit will have 75 displays and 300 switches, 11 switches on the control stick and 9 switches on the throttle. You're flying twice the speed of sound, pulling G's to the boundaries of consciousness, and then being shot at the same time. It's like Stuart's workday at Trimble, you know. So how do we solve that? I mean, there are lots of problems, and I won't go into these in detail, but certainly we had this problem of how do we aim things, and how do we take data in, and how do we operate 50 computers on board. And so the way we started solving these problems is going back to the basics. How do people really work? How does the human really work? Now, since I was working on a Department of Defense budget, I had a lot of money to work with. And what I did was at that time, and this was in the middle, it's about 1975, 76, 77. What I did was I hired 100 of the world's authorities in human perception and performance and had them distill everything we knew about humans and put it into this resource. It's still out there today. You can get it, and it's not bad. It's not really that out of date. And from that, we discovered just how humans work. And fundamentally, it boils down to the fact that humans really are three-dimensional beings. We see and hear and touch in 3 dimensions. Anytime we deviate from that, we cause problems. And that we have to learn something. We have to adapt, things like that. So I came up with a number of solutions for this in the early days. Here I am, Lieutenant Furness, wearing the first head-mounted display. This was an Air Force helmet plugged in the side, so it took the information from various cockpit instruments and from sensors and give you this picture. as you looked around. And then we tracked where that picture was with a helmet sight. Now, to begin with, these were two separate systems. So here I am wearing these two systems back in the 60s. And then in the early 70s, we combined them together into an integrated helmet-mounted sight and display. And now we can now create this circumambience of virtual information that you see through. While you're flying the airplane or at night, it takes the place of the real world. And so the whole idea is to figure out how in the world we're going to integrate that with all these systems in the cockpit I mentioned before. And this is where we got into this whole notion of virtuality. Certainly, what we can do virtually is different than what we can do physically, because the physical cockpit was limited. It had limited space, very expensive if you're going to change anything in the cockpit. But with virtual reality, you didn't have to worry about any cockpit space. And so you could create a picture as big as you wanted to, and project it and move it as a function of what the person was able to do. So that's where the super cockpit came from. This cockpit that you wear. Pilot puts on a magic flight suit, magic helmet, magic gloves, and then is able to be in the circumambience of three-dimensional information. It has 3D sound, 3D sight, 3D tactile stimulation. We're doing this in 1986, and we're flying it in various test aircraft, which I was actually flying in. So I got a chance to be in the fighters themselves while we're testing this equipment. So it's a little different when you're sitting in a laboratory playing with this versus when you're sitting in a cockpit flying near the Mach while this is going on. So the idea then was to transform this traditional cockpit into something that looks like this. And so it's a fusion of all the information of these sensors into a picture. And this picture communicates very high bandwidth to the human that we wouldn't have otherwise. So it's a fusion of information from your navigation systems, your terrain avoidance systems from other friendly and possible enemy aircraft, all your information about your aircraft and things like that. And then we also had to then go one step further, and we said, okay, well, that's great, that's a good artist concept. How would we actually prove that this would work? And that's when we built the Darth Vader simulator, which was called a visually coupled airborne system simulator. In 1981, we turned it on for the first time. And this was like a IMAX theater you couldn't believe, because it was 120 degrees, more than what you get out there with the modern technology today. 120 degrees, stereographic, head tracking, eye tracking, speech input, tactile gloves, the whole works. And now you can do that when you have a Department of Defense budget. It was a very expensive helmet, but nevertheless, we proved what would happen here. And then from that time, we worked on variations of this theme. As a matter of fact, if you look at the F-35 cockpit, you'll find this really crazy-looking helmet that people are using. And that came from my work, early work at Wright-Patterson. So, in my trail, back to hiking this VR trail, there was a bend in the trail that where I decided to actually leave being a warrior and becoming an academic. And the University of Washington made me an offer I couldn't refuse to set up a new lab there. First one ever. That will work on the concentrate on human interface technology. And I started that in 1989. And that was an interesting experience, because it's different working in the academy than working for the Department of Defense. You find out there's not this vertical structure that you have in the military. Sort of all horizontal structure, but it was fun because you got everybody excited, and that they did things because they wanted to do it. And so aside from the fact that one of the first students on the doorstep was Mark Billinghurst, who started working on this thing in the early days, there are a few things that we did. The first was my first patent to get virtual world technology out into the field. And this personal eyewear display, my patent and issued in '92, was really the first consumer virtual display ever. And so that exposed people. It wasn't a particularly wonderful display. It was a limited field of view. But it did work, but it cost too much, and it was a dismal failure in the marketplace. But it did result in lots of other cool things happening. So here's what the product was. The Virtual Vision company that we spun off out of the HIT lab started making these things so that you could watch TV while sitting out in the world, right? You can be sitting on the beach and you watch TV. Why you want to do that? I'm not sure, but you could do it, with our technology. And so as it turns out, people thought it was really cool to do that, but they weren't going to pay $799 to do that, which is what it cost at the time. But some people were willing to pay for it. Dentists started buying these systems like crazy. And we started doing a little study of why is this happening, and found out that they're trying to entertain the patients. What they're doing is putting these patients, the patient will come in, doc puts the dentist puts the headset on, you select a movie you want to watch, and then now you're zoned out watching this movie while the dentist is inflicting pain on you. And the dentists loved it. They said, gosh, this is great. The patients don't complain anymore. I can get on with my work, and they seem to be happy. But it did create a whole new set of problems. Now they couldn't get the patients to leave. I can't leave now. This is the good part, And so that became a problem. But even more fascinating in that was what happened with the kids. So you see this little girl is actually playing Nintendo with her headset. And and the kids loved it. The kids would ask their mother, when can I go back to the dentist so I can play? And when did you ever hear that, from kids wanting to go to the dentist? But it was amazing. And then after that, we got into the pain work. This led us to all the VR for an analgesic for pain, which is now used around the world. And as we found that we can now deal with pain by putting people in virtual worlds. And what it is a distraction. Lets them do that. So this paradigm shift has gone on for a number of years. I mean, we see a lot of things happening today, but it really started a long time ago. And we learned a lot, especially the human factor side of things, a long time ago, and what we have to take into account. And as far as the hardware technology is concerned, you see this evolution. Here's, by the way, my original virtual vision display. You can buy it now for $199 or less. And then, of course, the Google Glass, and now you hear the Magic Leap and the HoloLens and all these came originally from that technology we did years ago. One of the things that was a clear paradigm shift we needed was the fact that we were still trying to look at an object. Most of the virtual reality headsets were starting off with an object to begin with. An intercathode ray tube, a liquid crystal array, something like that. And so basically what you're trying to do is magnify, collimate it, project it so it appears at optical infinity. That's what the Oculus Rift, with the Vive, all these headsets do today. They start off with an original image. Now, we fortunately have some higher resolution that comes from that kind of technology than we had before. But still, you're looking at a real image and trying to make it big, trying to make it virtual, and it optical infinity. And so there's a real problem with that, because you flat run out of picture elements. Not only that, you can't make them bright enough. The more elements you put in, the dimmer they get with traditional methods. But what if you could do this? Instead of having this array of pixels, which you're basically looking at through infinity optics, what if you actually just started off with a beamed enamel and scanned it directly on the retina, so that there is no screen? The only place there is a screen is the retina. The retina is the screen on which you write this beam. And that's the virtual retinal display. You're actually moving one pixel really fast to scan this picture. You can make it really bright. You can make it as wide a field of view as you want to. And refresh rate, all of this, all gets into pixel flow is what you can do there. So this is the virtual retinal display. It was my patent that issued 20 years ago. And guess what? It's expired. And now, Magic Leap is using it. All these other guys are losing it. So it's the moral of this story is don't be too early with your stuff. But it was a chance for us to look at transformative ways of creating images with retinal light scanning. Here you see a virtual retinal display where basically the image is being scanned onto my retina using micro lasers. We start off with helium neon argon ion lasers, and we split up the light red, green, blue, modulate it, and then send it through a single fiber up here. You can't see it goes right up here to the scan head, scanned in through an optical system into the eye, and the image is formed actually on the retina of the eye, and you can see through it at the same time. So it's either an immersive display, when you block it off, or it's a see-through display, or a combination of the two. So that was, again, quite a few years ago when that happened. Since that time, in our original patent, there was a provision in there for modulating the light wavefront. One of the problems with affinity displays is that all the pixels are in optical infinity. So what you're doing is taking this original object, you're putting a lens in front of it, so it collimates it, makes the light rays parallel, so this appears to be at optical infinity, right? Well, the problem is, if you're doing 3D, a lot of the objects that you're looking at are not at optical infinity. As a matter of fact, 3D really doesn't do you much good when you go beyond about 10 to 20 feet away. Then it's parallax. You get more 3D from parallax than anything else. So if you're operating up close, then you're doing the worst thing you could be doing. You're taking all those pixels and putting them in optical infinity, but you're creating a Virgin's cube, a binocular cube, that's here something at arm's length away. So there's a conflict between the accommodated cues and the stereoscopic cues in the eye. So one of the things we worked on using the virtual retinal display is this true 3D display, where we actually modulate the light wavefront so that each pixel is at the correct distance. So it's like the real world. And we've demonstrated that, and this is the stuff that's in the Magic Leap. Matter of fact, the guy who worked on that project is the chief scientist at Magic Leap. So those are the kind of things you have to take into account. It's not just buying a headset and putting it on. Remember, there are other things. We don't have it right yet in terms of the commercially available products. Okay, along the way, here's Mark again. He shows up. Mark starts in 91. I think that was the first when he first showed up, and then joined by Kato. Here's Kato, and we come up with this AR toolkit, Mark and Hero, and that becomes the beginning of a video-based augmented reality. And Mark and I and Kato started the very first AR company, AR2 Works, the granddaddy, in 2001, and just recently sold out to Daiquiri, and it's being continued to be developed. So all of these things, there are lots of pioneers. Lots of people have gone before. Here are some of the notable ones. I actually have to add another one here. But there's a placeholder for Rob Lindemann right there. And but the point is that it's not one individual. It's really standing on the shoulders of giants, and it's all working together like you in this particular group. So let's go back to the basics. Let's say that we want to figure out how in the world a human interacts with a message. So we have a message in a medium. So what we have is the green blob. This is symbolic, sorry, this is really basic stuff. Green is content, whatever it is, images, data, whatever. The blue here, the blue circle, is the delivery mechanism, a screen. Here is the human. The human has two parts here too. We have this red part, which is our blood. This is our sort of our body, our sensory end organs. Inside the red circle is the gray matter, right? This is our mind space. And so what we have is really four components. We have the human with our body and brains, and we have the medium and the message. The medium being the blue circle, the message being the green dot, right? This is pretty basic stuff. And so when you apply this in the real world, what you see, whoops, that just went and left. Anyhow, you have, of course, here's your real world, and then you have, in the case of a screen in your office, you have this blue thing, and then you saw the little green blob appear there. That's the content that goes in that medium. Okay, now, when we're talking about VR, it's entirely different what happens. Because VR is really writing on the brain. As I mentioned, this retention thing. This is the power of immersion. This is the power of putting a place in a person in terms of what you retain. It's like writing on the brain with permanent ink. Once you've been in a virtual place, an interactive virtual place, you never forget it. It's like the difference between watching a video of Disney World versus going to Disney World. I guarantee you'll never forget going to Disney World. But you will forget watching a video about Disney World. Chances are. So this changes things dramatically in terms of what we're doing with this medium. We're actually now transforming from something, well, you remember when we went from watching TV, we were sort of in the third person mode, we're watching movies or something. We were third person, right? We're sort of outside, we're passive viewer and things like that. When we started playing interactive games, we became first person. We were now the actor, first person, but we're interacting through a screen or medium. VR does some of that. It breaks the glass, and now it's not first person anymore, it's personal. You're stripping away everything, and now it's you that's there, as if you are there. So what does this mean? So there's this transformation where now we go inside the content. So here we are inside the content. What do we see now? That's what we see, right? That is the message. We're in the message. Do you see a medium anywhere? We do it right. There is no medium. We're in the message. That's what's so transformative about this technology. Now, okay, so where are you going to go? What is that green blob, well, that green space that you're in? Well, these can be places that you captured yourself and you go back again to them, or places that other people have captured and you're going there. This new thing that was done with Google Cardboard and the New York Times, I don't know if you guys have seen this. Unbelievable. New York Times, delivered these 3D movies, these 360 movies, right? VR movies, and then shipped out 1 million Google Cardboards. And you get these Google Cardboards and you download this and put your cell phone in there, and you were there. You were there at the food drop in Africa when the Hercules flies over and drops the food. You're standing there. You see all the people, their faces, what's going on. I mean, it's amazing what you feel because you're there. It's not like watching a TV documentary. It's like you're there. And you will remember that immersive thing. There are also worlds that you can scale, like I mentioned with the atom building world. There's synthesized worlds, simulations, things that we couldn't do otherwise. I remember in the olden days, this is probably even a little before Mark, we had a surfing simulator where you would actually surf on mathematical equations. And so you would be pretending you instrumented a surfboard with actuators and things like that. There are all these interactive simulations and training simulations can be done, and then of course networking, all that. All of this is possible. One of the things that I want to do is I want to be in worlds where I'm scaled and get a butterfly's view of the world. Here I am, here's a butterfly. If I'm walking around a butterfly with that kind of scale factor change immersively, I'll never forget it. Never forget it. It'll always be in my memory. And that's the power of this technology when we talk about learning. Now, there's a lot more to it than just drawing these little diagrams. You say, okay, well, really, what are the factors that are going to get this bandwidth to the brain? Well, obviously, we have to take into account what the human can actually do. What is the characteristics of our sensory end organs, our receptor field, and things like that? How is it constructed? Because this is the filter that gets us into the brain. How much can we really handle in the brain? What do we already know? What do we already remember? Those things are factors. And by the way, you say, well, these don't change too much, right? Well, not much, but you do change what's inside the gray matter in terms of what you've learned, and you can train the visual system to work different than it does now. But where we're really working is this juncture of what content are we providing? What is the nature of the content, and then what is the delivery mechanism? So these two things are sort of what we're manipulating. And out here we're hoping that we're matching these things to these things in order to get the high bandwidth to the brain. We have to take into account, how am I doing for time? We have to take into account, of course, the way the receptor fields work. And a lot of you know this. This is your Psychology 101 or Biology 101. We have this amazing visual receptor field. If we looked at the number of receptors across that centricity, here's the fovea centralis right in the center of the eye. We get all these cone receptors. We peak cone receptors and they drop off, go out in the peripheral retina. But look here, in the peripheral retina, just off 10 degrees, 10 to 15 degrees. Look at this. We have more rod receptors in the peripheral retina than we have cone receptors in the fovea. Amazing. Now, generally, our display fields of view, when we're looking at monitors like this, or like here, we're not even coming close, even getting the stimulation to our receptor field with this. But there's the other thing of what these receptors do. They are actually wired to different places in the brain. And because of that, they do different functions. Our focal vision, which is mediated by the foveal retina, tells us of what effect. And so we have these saccades that move that around, that high definition field. But that's all within our ambient visual system, which is mediated by the peripheral retina that tells us aware of things. You can even walk down the street here with your paperback, stay on the sidewalk, not run into any trees, and still read at the same time. The reason you can do that is because you have two systems operating in parallel, the duality of the foveated information and the peripheral information. Guess what? We throw away most of this. And we found from the early days in doing the super cockpit work, it's more going on than you think. Because we found out that even outside here, that you don't even bring the consciousness, has an effect on your sense of presence. And that's where we get into this binocular vision thing. There's a lot of field of view involved here, going beyond 180 degrees in terms of our total vision with the left eye and the right eye. Now, how did we, back to this Eastman Kodak thing I was telling you about, one of the projects that they wanted us to look into is just how good does it have to be? How good does that display have to be for you to go back to that place? How big does it have to be? What kind of resolution does it have to have, and things like that. So we said, well, our methods of testing now are very limited. We use questionnaires. How present do you feel in this virtual world? On a scale from 1 to 7. And it varies all over the place. Meaningless. So we want to come up with a direct measure, not a subjective, but an objective measure of what's getting into the central nervous system. So we came up with this idea of a postural stability, because that's wired directly to the human visual system. We've obtained our posture and our stability of our posture based upon two signals. One comes from our eyes, the other comes from our vestibular mechanism inside our inner ear. Okay, now we wanted to find out how we start interfering with that vestibular mechanism. That would tell us what's going on with the eyes. So we did a study, a postural stability study, where here you have a subject. This subject happens to be the principal investigator on this work, Henry Dew. Henry Dew is the director of the HIT Lab Australia right now, another one of my PhD students. But you see he's in a harness. Guess why he's in a harness? Because he's going to fall. Because here's a dome, we have his head immersed in this dome, we rear project on this dome at various fields of view, right? And then what we do is move it. And we want to find out what's the effect of field of view on his postural stability, how much he wobbles around. So we took these kind of patterns, just this radial pattern here, and we would rotate it, and these more natural patterns, natural scene, and we would move those, when in fact the scene was moving, but he wasn't. He was physically standing on this platform. And these are the results. This is what we call the dispersion This is dispersion, the mean dispersion that happens while you're wobbling, moving this around. So if you start this field of view at 30 degrees up to 180 degree field of view. Okay? 180 degrees is like this, guys. And so we found out, sure enough, the wider the field of view, guess what? The more dispersion. We thought it was asymptote. It sort of begins to asymptote a little bit with a natural scene here. But guess what? It's still going up. At 180 degrees, it's still going up. We use the peripheral retina in ways that we don't know. And in most of those ways, we do not even know it. We don't even bring into consciousness. Because if you flash a light out here, the person says, I don't see it, I don't see it. But then you move it, and they fall over. We built a hover display for helicopters with a field of view out here that you didn't even see, didn't even notice it was there. And had pilots hover a helicopter, simulated helicopter, with and without that turned on. Big difference. So that means that's something we have to remember is a lot of what's going on in humans we don't bring into consciousness, but they're there and they affect what we remember and what we retain. And then there's a lot having to do with field of view and the trade-off of field of view. And let me explain this graph a little bit. This is an interesting graph. Okay, let's say that you sweep spatial frequency. This is more and more resolution as you increase up here. I don't know if any of you guys have seen this diagram, kind of diagram before. But you increase spatial frequency. Number of cycles per degree of information is something that happens. So this is at low frequencies. You see sort of low patterns here, and it gets finer and finer and finer up here. You're sweeping that. In this axis, you're sweeping modulation, which is sort of like contrast. And you say, okay, there is a limit, a threshold for humans that's sort of like this. This is what you actually see back there at the distance. And this is sort of like a visual demand curve. Now, what is your display able to deliver in terms of spatial frequency modulation? If you're talking about a pixelated display, it's sort of like this. It drops off. You have a number of pixels per inch, right? Or per sub-10^9. So it drops off. So this area between this curve and that curve is really what we call MTFA, the modulation transfer function area. This is the ability of the display to deliver pixels, content to the eye. Now, if there's stuff down here, it's being delivered, but you can't see it, right? So this is a part of the optimization problem. But as you increase field of view to get the immersion, the effect is you're squashing the curve this way. So you get less and less MTF. So that means that there's a trade-off, a sweet spot, and that's the problem. How do you get the best trade-off of field of view and resolution of these systems? Okay, so along this trail that I've been hiking, there are a bunch of vistas where you look out over the terrain and you realize some amazing things about humans. I mentioned the pain one, I mentioned the education one, discovering how humans really work. One of the things that I stumbled on the process of that virtual retinal display I showed you, there was a guy that came into a lab one day. He wanted to see the virtual retinal display, and we sat him down in front of it, and he looked into it. This is a monocular version at the time. We scanned an image directly on his retina, and he sees this amazing virtual image. And he says, wow, that is amazing. And that's really bright and high resolution and things like that. And we said, well, take off your spectacles. And he did. And it's just as clear without the spectacles. Well, we are using the optics, really optics of the eye. And then on his own, he just happened to look with his other eye, with his left eye. He looked at the image and his mouth dropped open. He said, wait a minute. What are you guys doing here? And we said, well, we're scanning the image on the retina. He said, yes, but I can see this with my blind eye. We said, what? I'm blind in my left eye, and I can see the image with my blind eye. Now it turns out he really wasn't really blind. I mean, his receptors were still working, but there's a lot of scar tissue left in his eye from an automobile accident many years before. And he could see that image because we were getting through that with coherent light going into the retina. And then we went over to the hospital, the ophthalmology department, they started sending patients to us. Sure enough, it was working with these patients. So what we discovered by accident is a prosthesis for low vision. And we're continuing to work on that. There's a new technology we're working on right now for low vision. So there are lots of new trails that I would like to travel. I'm not dead yet. You know, I'm getting so old and creaky, but I still, you know, I'm going to go down swinging. There are a few things I do want to mention to you. We have to understand, you know, that we are deeply coupling the human to the machine in ways we've never before done this. We have to understand how humans work. We really have to understand how they work. Otherwise, we're going to scramble their brains and make them sick and do other things like that. I believe that we need this new operating system for virtual reality and augmented reality. We're all trying to work on Windows, in some cases Unix. They never were meant for this. Windows is not a real-time operating system. And so how do we make it work that way? We need to be driven, I think, by these applications that are good and lifting and heal the world. And I want to mention something about this virtual world society in closing. So one of the companies, I'm sort of the chief scientist of this company called Envelop VR. It's a new company in Seattle. It started from some guys that were game developers at Uber Entertainment. They're very well acquainted with real-time. And they started the company called Envelop VR over a year ago, and they're trying to build this new operating system for VR that first of all wraps itself around Windows 10. And what it does is take your 2D applications and you're able to rehost them into 3D. This is a screenshot of one of the systems where you basically are using your traditional keyboard and mouse, but you're now taking everything that you normally have on a screen, making it completely surround you and interact with it like you would on the desktop. So in terms of an efficiency generation thing. Now, I can get you keys for this, software keys for you to start working in this. And I recommend that we start doing this, that we start using this kind of technology to start doing our development rather than just trying to futz around with Windows or Unix and things like that. And so this company, for free, you get this key. But go to this newsletter and fill out a form there, send it to them, and I talked to them about this meeting, and they are happy to provide that to you so you can start playing with it and using it. Hopefully it's seamless, that you're able to, it's still in alpha mode, but it will help you do these kinds of things. We have some interesting things we're doing with Excel in this as well. Now, the other part, a thing that really, if I'm trying to look at what kind of legacy I'm going to leave when I crash and burn, you know, it really is how do we tap what's going on with the kids? Because really that's what it's about now. It's about the young people that are being born today. And how do we not take the place of imagination, but how do we augment it? And how we augment intelligence and take these schools that have dumbed kids down and bring them back up to where they realize the power that they have. And we see the power that they have when we see what they do with Minecraft. It's amazing what's happened with Minecraft. Minecraft is replacing games. I mean, kids now rather go play Minecraft than Grand Theft Auto, which is quite a transformation. And that's because they create and share. So Minecraft should be something that we look at and see that's what the kids really want to do. It turns out all those games that they play, they're made by adults. They're not made by kids. They're made by adults to addict kids. You know, they go buy them and things like that. Now some adults, they're already messed up. But the kids, you know, that's what we're after. So that's why I started this Virtual World Society. It is really this a not-for-profit society to basically do good with VR and to turn homes, living rooms, into classrooms. That's my goal, to do that. Now we're just starting out. So Mark is on the board of directors of the Virtual World Society with me and Chris Stapleton, and we're surrounding ourselves with 100 pioneers with the end goal of what we want to do is connect these pioneers together with these new adventurers, with the kids, and to provide this content to the home that uses National Geographic stuff, uses simulations of the problems that are going on in the world. We are connected to United Nations, UNESCO. identifying these world problems along with local problems that the kids will work on. It's like taking hackathons and meetups and putting them together into something that has purpose and has some place where we can sustain it. I'm in the process of raising money from the big companies, from Google. I have a meeting with Google here shortly about this, and Intel, Microsoft, these guys to kickstart it. But in the end game, what we want to have is 10 million families paying $30 a year to be members or subscribers of the Virtual World Society. That's $300 million that would have the work to build content and to do these hackathons around the world directed toward good things, solving problems. So go to the Virtual World Society landing page. That's what it is right now, pretty much a landing page. But there is a survey there that I'd like for you to fill out if you would. And so fill that out, and then hopefully we'll get you sucked in to volunteer for activities in it. My final observations, and finishing up a few minutes late, is that the homes are going to have more technology than classrooms. They do already, probably. And kids are going to be technology savvy. I mean, it's going to be their way of life. It's no big deal. And so we have to take that into account. And I think what is going on in this meeting with this group is addressing that. This is about what's going on in homes, what we can do in homes, not only for entertainment, but for this classroom idea. We have this great power to move minds, just like I was saying with Kodak. It's a transportation system. That's what VR is a transportation system for the mind. The question is, where are they going to go? We're going to transport people. And is it going to be for good that we do that? It can be certainly a lot of bad, but we want to take it to good. And the sort of the last piece here is we really do have to understand how humans work, because it's going to be a showstopper if we get 2, 3, 4 million headsets out there. People are wearing them all day, every day, for weeks on end. We don't have a clue what happens as a result of that. We don't know. Nobody knows. And that needs to be studied. Otherwise, we may have a really a showstopper here for this whole movement in VR. So that's it. Any questions that you have you'd like to ask, if God gives me a little time for that? Yes, Rory.
Did you have any issues with the beaming the lasers into people's eyes? Like, it kind of seems hesitant.
Well, yeah, well, see, that was the first thing that was a concern. Yeah. That here we're talking about coherent light, laser light. When people think about laser, they think of burning holes in like burning holes in the retina. Nothing different between laser light. They're all photons. The photons are coherent, which means they have more compacted energy. But we just tune it down, turn them way down, very low energy. As a matter of fact, the amount of energy that's actually going into the retina, the virtual retinal display, is less than you get going outside in daylight, because it's more efficient. So in a way, it's really not a problem. And we studied it. I had a physician on the staff, and we did lots of studies on this laser thing. And that's the first question that comes up. Yeah.
And motion sickness is still a problem in the body, and even AR, VR, and what are your thoughts around that being a block for adoption?
It is, and anytime you're going to provide a wide field of view display, that is, and when it moves different from the way your body is moving, you got a problem. You got a sensory conflict. The wider the field of view, the sicker you're going to get. Right. And but you want to get wide field of view for immersion. So for being there. There are ways to correct for that. Certainly there are ways of correcting for it in terms of what you do, how you move in that environment. Hopefully you don't do a lot of movement that's independent of the person. If the person is in control of movement, like in a flight simulator, it's not as big a problem as if you're a passenger and it's moving, and you have this disconnect with cues. We have also a few patents in this regard. The interventions, these are structures that we put in the virtual world that are inertially stabilized, and that helps ameliorate the problem. We actually, it's being used now in sailboats. Where when you can't see the horizon, And so you're tossing and turning. And so we provide the structure of what if you could see the horizon, this is what it looked like. And that corrects the problem. And that's basically what we do with this intervention. But so there are lots of things you can do in playing that game. And the way you move in virtual space, generally you don't necessarily, you sort of want to jack in from one space to another. You don't necessarily want to smoothly move into it. Because if you're smoothly moving into it, you're going to fall over. Like we had in the other experience. Now, people get used to that, then what we've done is rewrite things in the brain, which may not be good if they don't have to work in the real world. So that's what we have to be careful about. Yes?
The warnings for virtual headsets not to be used by children under 13, how do you see that in comparison to, say, about harnessing children's use?
There was some early work done, actually by Atari, that was never published, having to do with what happens with children using these headsets. And the data came back that you have this, and you're still up to 5 years old, are doing a major wiring of basically the sensory end organs to the brain. And that you want to make sure that the coefficients you get stored in there are correct. There's a lot of plasticity in the human nervous system, as you know. And so they're really concerned about that, up to 5 years old. Now, when Oculus comes in with the DK1, the DK2s, and things like that, they realize that they're sort of clumping in, they're making people sick and things like that. And they just came up with arbitrarily, I can't find any other reference, arbitrarily 13-year-old or 11-year-old thing. And, by that time, certainly, most of the sensory psychomotor brain development is done. But remember that it's plastic. Remember the inverting pictures that were done by psychologists? You put these inversion glasses on, it turns the world upside down. In about a day, you don't even notice it's upside down until you take the glasses off. And then the world that you see normally is upside down. Then it takes you a while and it switches back. But once that happens, you have two things stored in your brain. So when I was at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base working on the super cockpit, and I would spend hours inside that cockpit looking around and doing things, flying these airplanes. And when I get in my car to drive to go back home, I turn my head and something was not right. And the world sort of slipped on me. And I had to sort of do a double take. And that's because I had conditioned myself. And that's why I say we have to be worried, because when people are wearing these things for days and days and days at a time.
There's the guy did the bicycle, and then when you turn it went the opposite way.
Yeah.
I've seen that.
Yeah.
And then you flip it, and then at one point you just get it.
Yeah.
Because you can't do it. And then,
Right. Then it works.
But then you completely flipped.
Yeah.
At that point. Yeah.
So we're amazing. Humans are amazing that way. And we make up for deficiencies in some of our senses. We make up for that. We have all this incredible capability to adapt. But when we do adapt, there is a residual in that adaptation that we have to take into account.
But AR is better than VR in that respect, you think?
It is.
Yeah.
AR, because especially out here, the peripheral retina, as long as you're providing full view in the periphery, it's not going to be as bad. Certainly. And you're basically there, you already have your inertially stabilized information out here with the real world. Yeah.
Unfortunately, VR is more wow. There's a dilemma.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Okay, but now, you went a year or two, you see.
I would actually say it's not AR versus VR. It's the level of immersion. So
Yeah,
right.
you can still have a virtual display that's non-occlusive, right? So the Z800, actually people don't get sick as much in this display because they have all the real-world cues to help them. So I think part of it is, again, AR, VR is a continuum, but I wouldn't look at it as AR is better, but rather less occlusive is better, right?
Well said. Anything else? Okay, thanks, guys.